Hello and welcome back. I thought that today I would show off a little bit of an older project that I did last year. This was all before I started on my Versailles mega project. This is the Catherine Palace, which was an Imperial Russian palace outside of St. Petersburg in Pushkin. Now, even though you might think that the Catherine Palace was named for Catherine the Great, it was actually named for Catherine, the consort of Peter the Great, which was in the early 18th century, whereas Catherine the Great reigned during the late 18th century. This was a summer residence for the Imperial Russian family, and you may recognize it from the 1997 Don Bluth movie Anastasia, where it's a stand in for the royal palace. Uh, in that movie, it's shown in the wintertime when really the winter palace was actually in the city of St. Petersburg. It is still there today. And it's also in a Rococo style, though with green walls instead of the blue that you see on the Catherine Palace. The Catherine Palace was outside of the city by design as a summer retreat. The idea back then was that diseases would move around more apparently in the summertime. So if you were rich or a royal, you would want to be outside of the city with a little bit more fresh air. So this was the summer residence. It was built over the course of the 18th century. It's in the Rococo style, which is an offshoot of Baroque. Though usually Baroque has more dark colors, Rococo is usually a bit lighter. You see that with pastels like the blue walls, lots of white columns here, also lots of gold elements. It was a little tricky to do in Minecraft, and let me know how you think I did this if you're familiar with the real Catherine Palace. In the course of doing this project, I developed a lot of textures that later came in handy when working on Versailles. Going inside here, we can see the entry staircase, and off on one side, we have the courtier's dining room, which was a smaller dining room that was just off of the Great Hall. This was the largest room in the palace by far and was used for formal events, state events. Lots of windows, lots of light. It's the entire width of the palace. And I tried to work in as many gold elements as I could, try to make it brightly lit, just like the real one is. And if we continue on this way, we go through the antechambers. Now, similar to Versailles, an imperial palace like this, the rooms wouldn't necessarily all have, oh, there's the parson. The rooms wouldn't necessarily all have specific uh, roles to play. They were often used for whatever was required. And that's part of why there would be antechambers like this. They're not specific, oh, this is the dining room, this is the living room. They're extra spaces for use by the court. And in some of these rooms, you can see my attempts at Eastern European style wood stoves with Delft blue porcelain tiles. I went through a few different variations on those, and ultimately, I like the way that these ones came out. They're best for the really large ones, though, which in the real Catherine Palace, they are very large wood stoves. There are fireplaces elsewhere in the palace. I've also embellished a little bit and added a few things of my own. But going across to the other side of the palace, we have the white dining room, which was another small dining room compared to the very large antechambers and great hall. And we'll have a series of salons. Now, the order of these is a little bit different than in real life. See, there's the green ribbon room, the red ribbon room. There's also supposed to be the amber room. I did build an amber room, though it's in a different place in the palace. And that was something that I also had a little bit of difficulty with. I used the resin blocks and came up with a texture for that. But this room, though, I really like. This is a portrait gallery. It's also the width of the palace. And we have a lot of the paintings that I've imported for the texture pack. Here you can see the red ribbons on the wall. And here's my attempt at the amber room. The amber room is actually in a different part of the palace and has higher ceilings. The location of this one, I have apartments up above. That's a dog that's covered in armor, which I made to look gold for the sake of statues. But here we'll go into some of the royal apartments. Now, I haven't been able to find any good reference pictures for these. So if you know of a source that would help me figure out what the royal apartments are supposed to look like at the Catherine Palace, please share it. I used Google Street View for a lot of the research here because there's a handy tour that goes through the staterooms of the palace just on Google Maps. But for these rooms, I couldn't find anything. This is based off of a picture that I saw of a bedroom. I believe the monarch's bedroom, though I'm not sure. And then over on the other side of the palace here, we have the anteroom and then the chapel. This I tried to make look as much like the real life chapel as I could. And I went through a few different design variations. Of course, I have an enchanting table back here. I'm always thinking about ways that my creative Minecraft builds would be fun for survival play. Let's see, we have a lot of different embellishments and details. And going through the antechamber, we get to a part of the palace where I don't want to say I phoned it in, but it is very Spartan. I really don't know what's over here. Part of the issue is that in real life, the palace was actually burned during World War II by the Germans, and all that was left was a shell. And the Soviets actually rebuilt the palace starting in 1957 using reference pictures that were taken before the war. And today it's a museum that people visit. We have the iconic onion domes here that are very popular in Russian architecture. These mark where the chapel is. And you can see how long the whole of the palace is. I believe that I measured it out to be about as long as the real one. And looking through the windows, you can see some of the other rooms that I just kind of winged it on. I did make sure that there are no empty spaces, even though a lot of the rooms themselves are devoid of furniture. There is something in every part of this building. But the most important parts, the staterooms, the grand hall, these are all things that I put a lot of time and effort into. Some of the fun little things that I tried to do, I thought, well, underneath the Great Hall, it would make sense for there to be kitchens. Though, in doing research for Versailles, I realized that the kitchens, the main kitchens, weren't even located within the palace proper, that they were in the basement of the Grand Common. So I'm pretty sure that the dependencies in front of the Catherine Palace probably housed kitchens. It would also make sense for the sake of safety. If the kitchens always have fires going for cooking, you don't want to risk those fires causing the whole palace to catch. And here you can see I just put little bits of furniture, lamps. There were a lot of apartments for not just the royal family, but also for courtiers in the real Catherine Palace. Yeah, here it's a little dark, even in daylight. And also, with researching Versailles and realizing that even on the ground floor, beneath the Hall of Mirrors, beneath the other state apartments, There were apartments for the children of the monarch, and I'm sure that it was much the same with the Catherine Palace. I'm not sure if at any point I will come back to this project and do renovations. Like I said, I'm not sure if the real one even has furnished rooms elsewhere in the palace. But it was a nice project while I was working on it. And as I said, it was a good primer for other Imperial projects that I would work on. You can also see a little bit of a difference in how I did the grounds for this palace versus what I would ultimately do for Versailles. Going here along the Cameron Pavilion, which was a later addition to the palace, and in a little bit of a different style than the rest of the Rococo facade. You can see that the grass, it's just flat grass. I don't really have wildflowers or leaf litter or short grass anywhere. It does make it look a little plain, a little empty. That's something that since then I've developed better eyes for detail on. And also some of the flower beds and other things. I didn't necessarily look at reference pictures. I just kind of did what I thought made sense. You can also see here how close this palace is to the Palais Garnier Opera House, which I showed off in a different video. I had built the Palais Garnier first, and I thought that I should have something equally majestic nearby. And I had been reading up on the Catherine Palace and thought, if I take the forecourt with the kind of horseshoe shaped dependencies and just invert those, then those can curve around the Palais Garnier, and then I can just have a much narrower forecourt for the Catherine Palace. And here, of course, you can see some pictures of the real life Catherine Palace, along with what the inside looks like, and also some floor plans that I used for reference. I hope that you enjoyed this shorter video of an older build that I did. And let me know what you think. Let me know if you've been to the Catherine Palace or if you've seen more references that would help make this project a little bit more realistic. And please check out my other videos. Thank you for watching. Bye.